Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the timing reminder. I was a bit caught up in looking through whether I've missed any things that are not yet in my prepared overview. So hello, everyone. This is a meeting of the CBOR working group of the IETF. You know the note well. It's printed here. It applies as always with these interims. And we have an agenda for today. And as always, that is mainly managed in the minutes. So please have a look at that other document. Okay. If I mention Michael and he's not responding, remind me to ping him because he's in another meeting as well. For the overview of the agenda, I'll already jump into Carsten's slide because why do things twice? We'll have a very short summary of what is happening in more control, spend a lot of time on ED and literal, and then briefly touch on the status of CTE and packed CBOR. But frankly, I'll think where I prepared most is ED and literal. Are there any comments on the sequence of things and things that you want me to not forget to do today? Hearing none, let's start. Carsten, you've prepared a bit about the more control.
Right.
Slide control. Yep.
Okay, I do. Yeah, so more control is in the ISG telechat meeting tomorrow. We have had a pretty uneventful directorate and ISG review phase so far. Of course, other things can come in. We have a couple pull requests on the GitHub side, I think. Some merged, some not yet merged. And my plan is to generate a version of more control, which will be -08, I think, that will include all these changes. So those who care about this document, maybe you can have a quick look at the GitHub repository, but I don't think there's anything controversial in there at all. That's all.
Thank you. That was as quick as hoped. For the any questions to that? Hearing none, for the EDN part, I'd like to put a bit of structure to that before we jump into the two presentations, because Joe has prepared a few slides and Carsten has prepared a few slides. So we are in the middle of a working group last call. Carsten has already processed some comments from Rohan and Michael Richardson into what is now -16. And -15 has been available since I think yesterday, and I've already started implementing things there. Thanks a lot for the changes; they were good.
Actually, -15 has been available, and -16 is a PR that I missed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Rohan, I see you in the queue.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the effort here to make, to incorporate changes. It would be nice if PRs didn't, sat for 24 hours or more before being merged. So, I could make some comments on them. One of these PRs was in, I think, 10 hours before it got merged. So just a process comment there.
Just for clarification, do you think that should also happen for say small editorial things, or is that limited to substantial changes?
Substantial changes.
Okay, thanks. Yep, I agree that this would be good to have.
Yeah, let me just mention that the technical change that's in the mandatory space comma thing actually is a significant change, and we definitely have to look at this some more. But it's still useful to have it in a document that incorporates all those changes. So please don't consider a merged change something that is already cast in stone.
Joe?
I'm just all I'm
Yeah,
saying
sorry,
is
Ron.
that it makes sense to, if we have a PR, GitHub has this nice place where you can have comments about the PR and where you can propose minor changes to it, or you can ask questions about specific lines, and that's extremely valuable. And I think the value of being able to use that for a short period of time is more important than having something in a fully in a document, even in the editor's copy.
So the thing I wanted to say was I also need 24 hours before an interim to process documents. Like getting a document an hour before the interim that I'm supposed to read the diffs, 2 documents since I went to bed that I have to read the diffs for. And also, I didn't get the slides until the last minute either. So I get that deadlines are there for a reason, but the deadline needs to be yesterday, not today.
I'll take that as an action item to put nudging people for slides and updates as part of the meeting preparation, and not just letting it happen at the last moment.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So coming back to the overview of where the document is, things have been processed into pull requests and now into even a document version from Rohan's and Michael's comments. And we have a few open topics that I would group like this. There is the topic of over-escaping in in the ABNF. Over-escaping around application literals, which results in differences in complexity depending on whether a single or double pass parsing is done. There is a recurring topic of whether or not having comments in app strings is a good idea, and whether they should kind of look, what does it mean to have a comment in there? There's a topic of the encoding indicators on whether they kind of, what level of extensibility we expect. And there is the topic of whether the kind of, what should be the primarily presented approach to the ABNF, whether it's the single pass or 2 pass approach that is shown in the document. I think that most of them are picked in one or the other presentation. And with that, I'd like to invite Joe to kind of, I think I can just, can you request slide? I cannot even pass slide control. So you should be able to show your slides now. Please go ahead.
I think that's it. We're seeing that?
Yes.
All right, good.
Just before you start, Rohan is also in the queue. That might be a procedural thing.
Yeah, I do want to discuss the optional comma, but it's less the optional comma stuff, but it can happen after the discussion about the stuff that's on Joe's slide.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this is a little sort of remedial for the folks who have been following the conversation, but I decided to pull it out just to make it super clear exactly what we're talking about so everybody can follow along in this conversation. So right now, the way that app strings are processed means that this input with a Unicode escaped 0 is valid in an H app string, which was shocking to me once I finally realized what was going on. Once I realized what the ABNF FROB tool was doing, which was making it so that every possible character that could go into an app string could be either its literal form, in this case is 0, or its Unicode escaped form, in this case with curly brackets, or the \U0030. And so all three variants of every single character have to be ingestible, which makes the output of that tool pretty big. So what is kind of envisioned in the current approach is that you take the thing that's inside the quotes. In this case, the thing I say here is snip. You do the Unicode conversions in one pass. Then you start up a new parser for appstring H, and you pass in the Unicode unescaped version. And then you get this particular CBOR hex. So I, in particular, would prefer not to start a new parser instance for each one of these things. I've got the grammar for H right in the same grammar that I've got for everything else. I've got an extensibility point that I figured out how to do, so I can pass in new appstring things without it being a problem. It's not as if there's an off-the-shelf parser for this H format or for the base 64 format, because that B64 format has comments in it, and none of the existing B64 processors handle those comments. Of the other ones, like IP and date, they have we've copied in the existing ABNF from their respective RFCs, and I haven't gone through and double checked to make sure they're exactly the same. I assume they were copy and pasted, so I haven't done that. But if I use an existing IP parser, for example, I don't know if they've used the exact same form that's in the RFC, which would make sense. I have to actually go and look and double check to make sure the thing. So what I'm doing is using the grammar that's in this draft to parse IPs and dates. All right, so the problem is that if I want to do one pass on the grammar instead of two passes, then I can't just use the original raw input. I have to cook it first to take out the Unicode escapes. And then if I pass that into, even if I was to take a second pass at that, now the offsets for errors will be in the wrong place. Because, so for example, say there was a problem in the comment that was in this H app string that I've got above, and then the offset for where I put the arrow for where the error is will be off by whatever the length of that Unicode escape was, and it's basically impossible to reconstruct the actual pointer into the original text. It's just without having some sort of weird data structure that keeps track of basically like source mapping, which is massive overkill for this. All right. Before I go on, any questions on that? Any clarifications anybody needs? All right. So this is what the tool does. It takes the input, which is relatively understandable, and turns it into this thing that says, I will take either a period or \U002E or a \U with a curly brace followed by a bunch of zeros and 2E. And so that's pretty difficult to read. Okay, so the Unicode escapes really aren't needed in in any of the app string formats that we're defining in this document. The one place where they are useful is in the comment section of H and B64. And other than that, they hinder readability. So my opinion is that they're undesirable in any of the existing formats that we're defining in this doc. I think the fact that they impair readability is not so much an opinion. I think that feels like something we could agree on. But then going forward into that means them are undesirable, I think that's other people might disagree with that. So Carson's brought up that he wants to do CRI next, and that has so if I want to do an example that has Unicode in it, but use that in a document that only supports ASCII, then I might like to use Unicode escapes in that format. I think that that's a very small slice of what might be desired. I don't think there are that many ASCII formats that we care about anymore, and B, don't think it would be terribly readable to design an example that looked like that. I don't think it would be useful as a teaching tool, etc. I think you'd lose the value of having included a Unicode bit in there. Now, if you wanted to use that in a test, I could see that, but again, test files should be UTF-8 anyway, so I don't understand what the actual use case here is. So are there any all ASCII formats that we care about? Does anybody have a suggestion about an all ASCII format that we need to support?
Not an all ASCII format, but like we are producing internet drafts, and even those cannot include all the Unicode characters. So there are situations with limitations, but I think that the author knows what formats their thing is going to be used in and can select characters appropriately for that format. Unless they want to show limitations that can then not be expressed in that format. But I think another case there is that editing the document, you might not need this, but for displaying the document to highlight that, hey, this thing is not a semicolon, this thing is a Greek question mark, it's convenient to have such a thing. And diagnostic notation is supposed to be the thing that does the diagnostics. So the inner language, so if we have, say, C code or any other existing data format inside an application string, that data format will not necessarily have the need to do non-Unicode, but EDN is a diagnostic tool, and for diagnostics, it's useful to have that, at least for non-ASCII characters. All right, for ASCII characters, there's a different proposal.
That's a completely reasonable argument that I don't disagree with. So this is why I wanted to have a discussion about it, is because I figured somebody would say something useful and interesting like that. Thank you. Karsten?
I think Christian has covered that. I just wanted to point out this is not a different format. It's a different selection of a character repertoire. And it seems that some of us are thinking in character repertoires a lot, and others are thinking in those not so much. And that may explain why we have a little bit of a problem communicating.
And then Michael's missing some of my words, apparently. Saying can't do... Yeah. So, and Carson's point is right. There's no Lexer separate in ABNF. And so there's only some number of passes of doing, parser expression grammar type things. And then Carson, you still have your hand up. Is there anything else you want to say?
Sorry, I have to remember to take it down.
Okay. And then some JSON processors sort of take whatever non-printable stuff they've got and turn it into escapes and output. And if that's something we desire, we should probably specify that. So this is a point that Karsten had raised somewhere along the line. And so, for example, if you've got like a /T, if you've got a tab, some JSON processors will turn that into /T on output. Go ahead, Karsten.
Well, the JSON processor would have to put it, turn it into a /T, because you can't have control characters in JSON strings.
Yes.
But I think generally the assumption here is that we are coming out of the JSON ecosystem, and that has certain practices that I didn't even think about identifying in the document. One of that is that you can get every JSON text in an ASCII-fied form. And actually, it's not just ASCII, it's a form that has an even more restricted source code repertoire. And that's an extremely useful thing, actually, if you want to go to hostile environments. Mm-hmm. So people use that a lot. And I would like to keep this property for EDN.
Okay. So I do think that certainly in the comments for H and B64, being able to use /U escapes is fine, but they don't need to be processed semantically. They're just text, but it means that the / has to make it into what goes into the second pass. So the / can't be processed in the first pass. It has to come through raw. For other formats, oh, here, this is probably my next slide. All right.
Rohan is also in the queue. Could you?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I want to go back to what Karsten just said, which is, the lineage from JSON. But JSON only has double quoted strings, so we don't need to do everything. I think that we absolutely need to be able to process any string that was legal, any double quoted string that was legal in JSON. But I don't think that means that we need to do an app string for H, B64, IP, DT, those don't need to have the same restrictions. And so what I would propose is that for non-comment data inside of an app, a prefixed single quoted string, that whatever is data, that is, so not a comment, whatever non-comment data has significance in the grammar, doesn't get escaped. That's in the ASCII range, or that's in the non-control character ASCII range.
I'll just jump in here. That's a proposal that is out there since not too long before the meeting. Karsten will pick this up in the slides, so does it make sense to come back to that proposal then?
Yeah, I will have a slide on invariance that I think EDN needs to support, and this is not about not a place where we can decide for every single place in the syntax whether we support that or not, but it just needs to be a fundamental property of EDN that you can restrict the repertoire, because you want to be able to put EDN into documents on whiteboards and so on, and it simply must be possible to do this.
But so clearly being able to, so you can select the grammar to make sure that doesn't occur for your app string. So we're not talking about bare single quoted strings. We're not talking about double quoted strings. But the grammar that you use for your app string, I don't see a compelling reason why those grammars need to have need to escape the letter ASCII A.
Well, and if they do, that's something that they can define.
I think that's assuming that those are defined particularly for the app string. I think the more common occurrence will be that existing languages get placed in app strings.
I agree with you, Christian, and I think that is effectively what Joe said, which is the app string needs to define how that works, right? But
so if that means that in some cases there's 3 levels of parsers, then so be it.
No, why 3 levels? That
So
language
for example,
in the
if
current
CRI,
model.
if CRI doesn't have, I haven't read CRI, so if CRI doesn't have its own escaping mechanism built in, then it would need some sort of escaping mechanism to be put between the app string and CRI.
There's already one such escaping mechanism in place. That
Okay,
is
great.
the
Then
part
it doesn't
that
need
is
anything in order to
no,
support.
that is the one that is part of single quote strings.
That is part of app string today. So single quoted strings, I'm not proposing changing.
Yeah, I think we have the problem here that we are discussing various aspects here in light of various proposals that we don't all understand, and that in particular don't have names that we can use to refer to them.
Right.
So this is pretty complicated. I'd rather see Joe's other slides so we can get a better handle on what is being proposed.
Let me finish up here, and then we'll hand off to you. I can go pretty quickly from here, I think. So, number one, so the next issue is like, should new app string formats have be able to have comments? I would say, sure, why not? Rowan thinks perhaps not. Whatever, but we can either say discourage them. I think that if you are going to use an escaping format inside a new app string, it should be one of the 2 that we've got, and it should reuse the ABNF that we've got for those. And so if you're going to have comments, it should use the building blocks we have. All right, so my proposed approach is that we put in some building blocks for those app strings, for the app string grammars, that we, as we're reviewing new app string proposals, that we have a strong preference for reusing those building blocks, and that basically the raw text of the thing between the single quotes gets passed on to that grammar without modification. And then if any of those formats need whatever they need that's not, then it has to be in the app string grammar itself. And that T-sters and B-sters stay completely unchanged. All right, any questions on what the proposal is? I've got some ABNF here. So it's a relatively small set of changes, and we can argue over what the specifics are. I don't care about which characters are included or not, and we can make it so that it's only printable stuff. Karsten.
Yeah, let me just throw in some terminology here. So you have something that I would call a raw mode, where the content of that single quoted string is made available to the application extension.
Yes.
And you apply the raw mode to all prefixed strings and to none of the unprefixed strings.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, my thought is that the existing escaping mechanism stays exactly as is for double quoted strings and unprefixed single quoted strings, because it's valuable and useful in all those places. And then here's some building blocks that would become available. So app comment is either type of comment. App slash is just a slash comment. App hash is just a hash comment. And then, so H simplifies down to this. And the important thing here is that app hash and app comment are used rather than the direct sort of bits that are in there today. And that was it. And there'd be similar change to B64, and then date and IP don't change at all. All right, any questions on any of that? So I'd suggest that we stay on this topic and not do my last slide until we've sort of exhausted it, because I think this is more important than the other stuff, the encoding indicators.
Thank you. If there are no questions here, even though we talked about having the optional comments topic in between, I suggest we move that down so that we can stay on that topic a bit. I've rearranged in the agenda so that we don't forget to come back to this. Carsten, please go ahead with your slides. Carsten, I don't hear you.
Right. So this should work better. So I just skipped 6 slides, and we might want to come back to slide number 6. So I would like to expand a little bit on what I just said in the queue. So there are a number of objectives behind EDN that are not all spelled out very well, and I think people have commented on that. And part of the problem is that they are so obvious and so ingrained to people working in this space that it's really an exercise in eliciting tacit knowledge. Anyway, so EDN is not just a byte stream that falls out of one machine and goes into another machine, but it really is meant to be used in various environments beyond direct interchange. And that means I can paste some EDN into a document, and maybe with a little bit fighting with the document system, I'm able to get the EDN out there again and get something useful from that. So specifications can have examples in EDN and so on. And we also want to be able to move around EDN files in our source code processing environment. So they will go through various text file conversions when they go through various platforms. Most obvious thing is the new line transformation. We have source code editors that have interesting ideas like how to handle tabs. We have revision control systems that do some of these conversions automatically in the most unexpected way. So essentially, we need to shield the EDN user from as much of this complexity as possible. And that shielding will not be done by the spec designer. It will just be enabled by the spec designer, but the implementations will actually make sure that the right kind of EDN file is fed into the right environment. So this universality is pretty important, and one aspect that I think is just an invariant of any design in this space is you need to be able to get by with a minimal source character repertoire. And I think this should be ASCII printables plus new line, and we should not rely on being able to type other stuff. Many people have problems typing characters. And that's why we have prominent escape sequences in our various text-based literals, and these are kind of the part of the basic design. So one other thing that really was a brilliant decision by Jason was not to allow control characters in strings. I think that went one step too far by not allowing new lines, so you cannot have two-dimensional text in JSON except by putting it on one source line and having \n on that source line all the time. So that's one difference between JSON and EDN. We expand the source character repertoire by the new line, and have two forms of that, one including a CR and one not including a CR, but they are equivalent. And then we have the assumption that we don't need to protect the user as much from the higher Unicode characters as we have to protect them from the control characters, because the control characters have all kinds of weird processing in those environments I refer to, while the higher Unicode characters are usually left alone. Of course, that's only a difference in degree, and it's not perfect, but that's the way EDN has been designed so far. So that's the invariant I want to work from. Now, to make application extensions pluggable, we have to have a way to transfer the information that is in the EDN document to the application extension. And I think Joe has a safe, consistent way of doing this by switching into raw mode as soon as a prefix is available, because the prefix can take care of all the character processing that may be required for that literal. Okay, we do want to provide some guardrails here, so just making this completely open is probably not what we want to do. Juan?
So could you go back to your previous slide, please?
Yes.
So you said, you sort of, you got to the end of the slide and then carried on without us getting, I think, even everyone absorbing the content of what you just said, let alone us agreeing. So I think that would be useful.
Sure.
I'm willing to agree with this, even though I have said other things on the list. This is fine. This is perfectly reasonable requirement language for me. I understand why, and I'm willing to work with it. Yeah, I'm not even sure I exactly know what this means in that. So this is saying you can get by with a minimal source character repertoire, but it doesn't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I understand. Does that mean which escapes get used? Right.
Yeah, that's for the tools to decide.
So this isn't really an invariant then.
The decision of the tools is not an invariant. What I'm saying here is that whenever we design something, we need to consider this invariant and not violate it.
More like a design constraint than an invariant, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So if you say that there's a design constraint that if you can, as long as you can enter characters between hex 20 and hex 7e, then you should be able to express any character you want inside of EDN. I'm fine with that. I'm not sure what the rest of this is saying.
The rest of it is not about what you can express, but what the processing environments that we are using, that I had on the previous slide, are going to do to your document. And for instance, not allowing control characters in strings is a pretty smart way of reducing the amount of mangling that will be done when you transfer a file between different environments. So this doesn't have one corollary, which is that it must be possible to machine translate between full use, where you have all Unicode characters available, and one that uses a minimal source character repertoire.
Okay, I guess all I'm saying here is that I think we have a design constraint, which is the first bullet. I don't think the second and third bullets are design constraints or invariants.
Okay, the third one is essentially a relaxation of the design constraint. It's saying
exactly. That's why it seems a bit confusing, right?
Yeah, that's why it's called an invariant and not a design constraint. Yeah. Okay, but let's not pick on the level of those details. I just wanted to make sure that we have that captured, because it's just not just about what consenting implementations can do with a string, but also about how we can use it in other parts of our system. Okay, so this is my summary of, I think, what Joe's is doing in his change proposal. So we have this raw mode, which we use for prefixed strings. Prefixed strings are always single quoted in the current EDN. And in this raw mode, after the actual matching, which is essentially just making sure we don't stop at a single quote that is inside a backslash sequence, backslash escape sequence. After this matching, no further processing is done, and the raw characters are handed to the app prefix implementation. And that means that you essentially can plug in ABNF there as well. And the proposal provides ABNF for H and B64 prefixes. Joe?
Sorry, one thing that I just thought of is that another restriction on the grammars for app strings will be that they can't accept an unescaped single quote, which is not obvious.
Yes,
or an unescaped backslash.
Correct.
Yeah. So you have to follow certain design rules when supplying ABNF into a single pass implementation of this. But conceptually, we can think about this as a process that extracts the string in raw mode and applies the ABNF. And the fourth part was that we provide ABNF snippets for things like inline slash comments and hash mark end of line comments. So I think I understand this proposal, and I think we could do that. So we use raw mode for our prefix and use cooked mode for unprefixed strings. The alternative to that is to say, oh, we mainly have a problem with H and B64. These are really the ones where we expect to carry around large expanses of code. So we could use raw mode just for H and B64 and use cooked for everything else. So this is something I proposed a long time ago. I didn't get a lot of support for that, and probably won't get a lot of support for that today. But yeah, that's at least a proposal. And of course, the observation is that all the examples that are in the EDN document are ASCII only examples. So they don't benefit from using cooked mode as much as other examples like CI. Joe?
So I'm sorry, say that again. Which one would be raw and which one be cooked in your proposal?
Which one would be?
So you said H and B64 would be raw and
Raw?
the others would be cooked?
Yes.
I don't like that because then you still have to do the ABNF FROB to the date and IP ones, which I don't like.
Okay. That's a good argument.
Yep.
Now, another way to handle this would be to provide a choice, but it's not quite clear how that choice would work. So I don't have an actual proposal for that. And then we have Christian's proposal, which is on the next slide, where we always use cooked as in the current document, but we change the single quoted syntax to allow less in the way of Unicode escapes. So that would be different from the double quoted syntax. There's already one difference in what the quote character is, but this would be an additional difference, and we would essentially disallow using \u escapes for the ASCII printables, and we would also disallow //, but we will have to keep \/ and \quote obviously, and we would also have to keep ABN FROB, but of course the output will be much more manageable than it is today. So this is how I understand Christian's variant. And my proposal actually is what's in the draft. So I don't have to present anything. I'm just trying to make sure we have a good terminology to discuss the various variants. Joe?
Just clarifying question. This is only for prefix single quoted or for unprefixed single quoted as well?
I think it makes sense to apply this to any single quoted, just because it's a single ABNF rule and there is no need to support UTF-16 legacy stuff in parts that we specify new. But I don't care too much.
I like being able to use \U0000 in a single quoted string.
Yeah, you would continue to do that because we are only excluding the ASCII printables.
I think he was
I see what
referring
you're
to yeah. You at least the curly brace version works, but I think it's just the unpaired the kind of unpaired UTF-16 surrogates that would be removed.
I'd have to think about this a little bit more. This does make ABN FROB the output of it a lot more readable. I agree. So that would take out one of my objections to it.
By the way, did you use the original version of ABN FROB, or did you use the fixed version I published a couple of days later?
I just looked at the output you sent me. My Ruby environment
that may still have been the old version. So it is a little bit more palatable already right now,
okay,
because I put in a little bit of abstraction there.
Could you send to the list a couple of examples
Yep.
of what the output is?
Yep.
Just like, because I'm having a hard time getting Ruby running correctly on my box.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ori, you're on the queue.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say basically the same thing. Like for me, it's really hard to understand these proposals without a couple concrete examples of like this is what we gain, this is what we lose. Ideally, those examples would sort of be pulled from the most high probability cases we're going to encounter. And I think someone else had mentioned previously like embedding of other languages, embedding of IDNA domain names, embedding of international names, that make use of Unicode, emojis. I mean, those are the important examples that I think a few spanning examples that cover those would really make it helpful for me to sort of understand the trade-offs between the proposals. All of this is as an individual. Thanks.
I've already taken that up as you spoke and created a pad in which I'll be filing in a few examples, inviting all the kind of basically mainly Carsten and Joe to also kind of file your favorite examples, and then let's see how they look on the different proposals and what's like allowed and disallowed and what we can expect. Link is in the pad. I'll send it out to the list as well. I think that seeing nobody run to the queue, I think with the escaping part, we are at the point where we all just kind of go look at the examples and mull it over once more, which would bring us to the topic of optional commas before we take basically this whole document to the end of today.
Did you want to talk about encoding indicators before that? Or after that?
I think optional commas are the kind of more urgent thing. And yeah. So Rohan?
Yeah. So the Rohan pointed out that you can get an EDN implementation of -14 to actually parse the string that is in the top of the slide, and that is just wonderful EDN in version 14. Of course, I wouldn't recommend doing that, but that's what the document actually said. And so he pointed out that it's probably a good idea to look at the JSON syntax again and require a space and or a comma in all places where JSON needs a comma. So we still have optional commas in other places where JSON doesn't allow them, which is also something, but that's relatively easy to realize. But yeah, this sounded complex, but actually if you look at the ABNF changes, they are pretty simple, and I think that improves the usability by making it harder for implementations to spew out garbage like the one at the top of this slide. So I believe we should do that. And if you want to play with this, the current ABNF is in the EDN ABNF version 041. And I need to find out why Joe cannot install that.
We can take that offline, and
yes,
maybe I could use a little bit of help. So the comment I wanted to make here is that I love the goal here of requiring space. Fantastic. Once I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, that needs to be fixed. I don't like the first example you've got here with a comma right after the encoding indicator. I don't like commas where they would be basically illegal in JSON.
There might be a misunderstanding. The encoding indicator is on a digit 0, on a number 0 that is encoded as an immediate value, not on the length.
All right, then I misread that, and that's my fault. I do want to make sure that there isn't like a bare comma. There shouldn't be possible to have like 2 commas in a row, or one at the beginning of a list or anything like that. And
Correct. So
and
there,
I misread your example. Sorry.
there is the list syntax uses the production MSC, mandatory space or comma, and after encoding indicator we just have a mandatory space, so as a comma is not allowed.
Okay, so I made some comments on PR number 74. I put a link in the chat. I'm gonna have to go here at time, but so I think so. We had a little discussion about whether we wanted to be able to have encoding indicators with whether we wanted to be able to have only commas or only encoding indicators and commas. I don't think that that's desirable to anybody. And then there was a question about whether comments, only a comment with no space should be considered as a separator. Those are two questions. But I also proposed an alternate version of the BNF to do this, which I think is a little cleaner, and it can work in the environment where both a comment is allowed or not allowed as the separator. You just would use the -16 version of MSC if you wanted comments to be allowed as the only separator. So like, yeah, Joe's example here, an array with 2 /foo/3.
Yeah, so I'm used to programming languages that have Alexa, so that makes the whole thing a little bit different. But I think we expect from programming languages that comments break the previous lexical item and start a new lexical item. So I think this should be allowed. It's maybe not my favorite way of putting things, but yeah, that would be my answer to this.
Sorry, your answer is you want it to be possible or not possible?
I want your example in the chat to be possible.
Joe's example, 2 /foo/3.
Oh, Joe's example, excuse me. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I disagree, but I also am not going to die on that hill. So thanks. I got to go.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
feel the same as Rowan there. Like, I don't think it's readable, but I understand your argument, and I'm fine with it. We can move on.
Speaking of moving on, we are at the top of the hour. Given that discussions will continue anyway on the list, it might still not hurt to is there anything anyone wants to add on the topic of encoding indicators before we all go follow up on the list?
I think the one thing that I want to say about encoding indicators is that if the normal mechanism is to error on them when they're not currently supported, so _foo, then they immediately ossify, and it's not worth having a extension point. And that's the thing I'm concerned about.
I've just had a private chat with Carsten before. I think the intention is for them to be ignored when not recognized, but I think that will become that will become a GitHub issue anyway.
That's fine. And if that's the case, then A, it needs to say that in the doc, and B, there needs to be some test strings for it.
Yeah. I think that we can manage that. Thanks everyone for being here and for the productive meeting. We have 2 items that we'll just have to carry over to in 2 weeks or to the mailing list. Thanks everyone. Have a good week. See you on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.